American biotech company Moderna is filing with regulators in the EU and the US to approve the use of its coronavirus vaccine. US Health Secretary says the first doses could be administered before Christmas. The most populous county in the United States, Los Angeles County, has entered what is being called a safer-at-home lockdown, which will last for 3 weeks. All gatherings with different households will now be banned. US President-elect Joe Biden has named former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen to be his Treasury Secretary. If confirmed, she will be the first woman to lead the US Treasury Department in its 231-year history. And the French government says it is dropping a draft law that would ban the filming of police officers. Those are the headlines.
I'm J.R. Whalen for the Wall Street Journal. Drug maker Moderna says it'll ask U.S. and European health regulators today to authorize its COVID-19 vaccine. If the U.S. Food and Drug Administration clears the shot, distribution could start within weeks. It could be the second to go into use in the U.S. by year's end. A vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech is already under review. A government watchdog says the Labor Department has consistently reported inaccurate estimates of the number of individuals receiving jobless benefits throughout the pandemic. The Government Accountability Office says that's resulted in lower than appropriate payments to some workers. And we report exclusively that Facebook is nearing a deal to buy Customer, a startup that specializes in customer service platforms and chatbots. People familiar with the matter say the deal could be completed as soon as this afternoon. It would value New York-based Customer at a little over $1 billion. We'll have a lot more coverage of the day's news on the WSJ's What's News podcast.
Welcome to this edition of NHK Newsline. I'm Raja Pradhan with the news from Tokyo. We start here in Tokyo, where public health officials continue to battle a rise in coronavirus cases. They say 311 new infections were confirmed in the capital on Monday. The officials say 70 people are now in serious condition. That's the highest figure since a nationwide state of emergency was lifted in late May. Last week, the Japanese government said the next 3 weeks are crucial in containing the virus. Over the weekend, IT firm Agoop said foot traffic in central Tokyo remained unchanged from a week earlier. That's based on an analysis of mobile phone data gathered with the user's consent. But there were far fewer visitors at tourist spots outside the capital compared to the November 23rd long weekend. The number of people was down 38% in Yokohama's Chinatown, south of Tokyo. Now, people are also getting prepared for the New Year holiday season. A Shinto shrine near Tokyo is selling New Year's lucky charms earlier than usual.
I thought it would be better to visit now than over New Year's. It will be so crowded, and we need to be mindful of others.
We can't allow any infections from our shrine, so I want people to visit between December and February so we don't see crowds over New Year's.
Officials reported over 1,400 new cases across the nation on Monday. In total, more than 149,000 people have been infected in Japan. Over 2,100 people have died. Now, business travel has resumed between Japan and China after the countries eased entry restrictions imposed in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Travelers will now be allowed to make short and long-term trips. Everyone entering Japan must self-isolate for 14 days. But short-term business travelers will not be barred from meeting other people or be required to stay in one place during that time, provided certain conditions are met.
Everyone is happy with resuming travel flights. We have to be careful not to spread the virus, but the economy is also important. We need to think about both things.
Travel agencies in China are busy handling inquiries from local businesses about trips to Japan. This agency in Guangzhou, in the southern province of Guangdong, says it's received more than 50 inquiries in the past several days about business travel to Japan.
The relaxing of the 14-day quarantine means we are likely to get more inquiries for travel arrangements.
The Japanese Consulate General in Guangzhou says there's been no specific explanation from the Chinese side yet about documents needed for submission. The coronavirus is adding further strain on home care services for the elderly. Companies say even before the pandemic, there weren't enough workers to meet demand. But now the fear of getting infected is causing many of the industry's aging workers to leave the profession for good.
It's been a difficult year for this company that specializes in at-home care for the elderly. More than 10% of its workforce has quit since the pandemic began. All of them were in their 60s and 70s, a demographic medical experts say could develop serious symptoms if they get infected.
It's an invisible disease, so it's really worrisome. Our job requires being in constant contact with people. I have no idea where I will get infected or if I will transmit the virus.
I wanted to continue working, but I was told it will be hard if I get infected by the virus, so I stopped.
Manager Kadowaki Megumi says she's tried hiring more people, but so far no one has applied. As a temporary stopgap measure, she's now taking on some of the workload herself.
Right now we are doing our best given the circumstances, but I am worried that it may not be enough if no one wants to work as a caregiver anymore.
It's a problem being felt across Japan. A recent survey of home care workers found nearly 40% say they know someone who has either quit or taking leave of absence due to the coronavirus. This 87-year-old husband has come to rely on home care visits to ensure his wife gets the support she needs. As of now, their service hasn't been disrupted, but he worries about what might happen if the situation worsens.
It's okay as long as I'm healthy, but I have a lot of chronic diseases. Once they develop, how can me and my wife live together?
He's considered relocating her to a nursing care home, but it's a choice he'd rather not have to make.
When she's at home, she can do what she likes. But if my wife goes to a facility, she'll be confined to a small area.
This expert says the coronavirus has exacerbated an already dire situation and thinks the government needs to take drastic measures to increase the number of home care workers.
There are concerns that if things continue as they are, there will be no services available even if nursing care insurance premiums are paid.
Kadowaki agrees and says the situation will worsen if things don't change soon.
If there is a disaster or the spread of infection, the responsibility of helpers will become even heavier than they are now.
Until then, Kadowaki says care workers will forge on and do their best to ensure people get the help they need, especially during these difficult times.
Iran's state-run television has reported the weapon used to kill one of Iran's top nuclear scientists last week was made in Israel. Mohsin Fakhrizadeh was killed in an attack on Friday. He's believed to have played a key role in Iran's nuclear program. His funeral was held Monday in Tehran. Iranian Defense Minister Amir Hatami has vowed retaliation.
Iran will seek revenge for the assassination of one of its people.
He warned the enemy knows full well he cannot commit a crime without getting a response from the Iranian people. Iran's English-language Press TV reported a source as saying the weapon collected at the scene of the terrorist act bears the logo and specifications of the Israeli military industry. Israel's intelligence minister told the radio station he did not know who was responsible. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he's seeking an apology from Beijing over what he says is a fake photo posted on a Chinese official's Twitter account. The photo shows what looks like an Australian soldier holding a knife to the throat of a blindfolded child. It was posted by Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian on Monday. Zhao wrote, "Shocked by murder of Afghan civilians and prisoners by Australian soldiers. We strongly condemn such acts and call for holding them accountable." In November, Australia's military released a report which found evidence that its troops were involved in the killing of 39 Afghan prisoners and civilians. It's apologized for any wrongdoing. Morrison lashed out at Zhao's Twitter post at a news conference later on Monday.
It is utterly outrageous, and it cannot be justified on any basis whatsoever. The Chinese government should be totally ashamed of this post.
He said Australia wants the post taken down. Another Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson commented on the issue at a daily press briefing. She said removing the photo is up to the Australian government and Twitter. Shifting now to a lawsuit filed against the Japanese government by people who were forcibly sterilized under the now-defunct eugenics protection law. A district court in western Japan ruled the law was unconstitutional, but it rejected the plaintiffs' demand for the state to pay compensation. The plaintiffs included a woman in her 70s who has an intellectual disability and a hearing-impaired married couple in their 70s and 80s. They demanded the state pay compensation totaling more than $500,000, arguing they were forcibly sterilized under the law. This is the couple's wedding photo. In 1974, the wife gave birth to a baby by cesarean section, but the baby died shortly after birth. During the cesarean section, the woman was sterilized without the couple's knowledge. The Osaka District Court said the law was inhumane and discriminatory as it defined people with certain disabilities or illnesses as inferior. But the presiding judge said their right to request damages had expired by the time the suits were filed. Japan's civil code sets a 20-year period following an illegal act. The wife communicated in sign language that she wants to appeal the ruling.
My anger and despair will never go away. We want another opportunity for the judicial system to consider our appeal.
The Health Ministry issued a statement saying it'll work on offering one-time payments. Last year, the Diet enacted legislation to pay about $30,000 to everyone who underwent sterilization. Officials estimate about 25,000 people are entitled to the money. Now, the cases were the third in a series of similar lawsuits filed across the nation. The rulings so far have not recognized the state's responsibility to pay compensation.